Hello everyone, I hope you have enjoyed the previous lectures and I hope that you are improving your knowledge about the new drug and clinical trial rules 2019. In this lecture, that is lecture 6B, we are going to see regulatory pathway and the data requirement for new drug and clinical trial 2019. This is very important lecture for you, those who require or those who are willing to apply for the clinical trials. So, we are going to cover what are the documents and requirements. Let us see one by one. So, the expected outcome from this lecture, that the learners will be able to know what are the rules under which they have to apply for the application to the clinical trials, that is rules associated with the clinical trials. Then what are the different types of committees like IND committees, then new drug advisory committees, which are the committees which evaluate your applications dossier, that we are going to see. Then what are the actual processes where the scrutiny is completed, then at which stage the committees they see the dossiers and applications, and when you get the approval. So, that the regulatory process will see. Then data requirement of new drug, what are the data you require to submit while applying to the application for the new drug approval. Then again we are going to see the data requirement for phytopharmaceuticals. The first is the data requirement for new drug and the data requirement for the phytopharmaceuticals. So, let us start with our first slide, that is legal provision for regulation of clinical trial. So, before applying to the application for the new drug or the clinical trial, one must know what are the rules under which they are going to apply and what are the rules under which they are going to get a permission approval. The rule 21st of the new drug and clinical trial, this is regarding the application for permission to conduct clinical trial of new drug or the investigational new drug. So, under this rule, that is rule 21, you can apply to the licensing authority, that is state license, central licensing authority. Then rule 22 is a grant of permission to conduct a clinical trial. So, under rule 22, you will obtain a permission to conduct phase 1, 2 or 3, whatever your application. Then rule 23 is permission to conduct clinical trial of new drug or investigational new drug as a part of discovery, research and manufacture in India. Then the next rule, that is rule 24, it is regarding permission to conduct clinical trial of new drug already approved outside India. The previous is for the manufacture in India and the next is for the drug which is approved outside the India. Rule 25, it is related to the conditions of permission for conduct of clinical trial. Once you have obtained the clinical trial permission, the permission under this rule 25, it gives some certain conditions which require to be complied while conducting the clinical trials. Rule 26 is the validity period. So, under this rule 26, the validity period for conducting or initiating the clinical trial that has been given. Rule 26 is the post trial access of investigational drug or the new drug. After completion of the trial, whether to give the patients or subject the post trial access or not, that is mentioned in these rules. Rule 28, it is related to the academic clinical trial. We have seen that academic clinical trial, it is not for the commercial market and it should be initiated by the investigator and it is for only for the academic purpose. Rule 29, it is inspection of premises related to the clinical trial. Under this rule, it has been mentioned that the sites or the CROs where the clinical trial is going on, that should be open for the regulator or the auditor, those who have been appointed by the central licensing authority. Rule 30 is the suspension or cancellation of permission. Once you get the permission for conducting the clinical trial or BAB study, so if the condition stipulated in that permission is not complied with, or if there is any violation of these conditions or rules regulation, then under the rule 30 licensing authority can suspend or cancel the permission. Rule 75 is application for permission to import new drug for sale or distribution. Once the trial has been completed, then for the import under rule 75 has to apply. Rule 76, grant of permission for import. Once you have applied and the data is complete in all respect, then you will get the permission to import that new drug for sale and distribution under rule 76. Rule 77 is the condition of permission for import of new drug for sale and distribution. So, the 77 it also stipulate the conditions after importing. So, while importing and after importing, what are the conditions? Like it has to be stored into the proper conditions, it has to be imported from authenticate source, that conditions are stipulated under the rule 77. Rule 78 is the suspension or cancellation of import for a new drug. So, if there is any violation of the condition stipulated into the import permission of or the drug which are imported into the Indian market found to be substandard or not of quality standard, then the import permission can be cancelled or suspended after giving a show cause notice. It is mentioned under rule 78. The next rule, that is rule 79, it is licensed to import new drug for sale or distribution under drug and cosmetic rules. So, this is under the 79 the license can be issued. Rule 80 is the application for permission to manufacture new drug for sale and distribution. So, first we have seen the application for the import, then license for the import, and under this rule it is application for manufacture. Rule 81 is the grant of permission. So, the first is the application, and under rule 81 it is a grant of permission to manufacture new drug for sale and distribution, that is for the marketing purpose. Rule 82, it is a condition of permission for manufacture new drugs. So, under this 82 rule, what are the condition? The applicant and the applicant who has obtained a permission to manufacture, what are the condition they have to comply with given under rule 82. Rule 83 is license to manufacture new drug for sale and distribution. Then rule 84 is the suspension or cancellation of the permission in case of the violation. Rule 85, the responsibility of importer or manufacturer marketing of a new drugs. So, what are the responsibilities that has been given under rule 85. Now, moving towards the next slide, that is which are the committees for the evaluation of application. Once the application is with the licensing authority, there is a procedure. We will see in our next slide what is the procedure. So, before that we will just have the brief about the committees. So, the first committees for approval of the application is the IND committee. This committee is for the evaluation of investigational new drugs, that is a new molecules. We have seen the investigational new drugs which is not approved elsewhere in the world, and first time it has to be administered to the subject or patient, that is new molecules discovered in the India. So, such type of applications are evaluated under the IND committee, which is chaired by DG ICMR and Secretary Department of Health and Research, along with the experts from different fields and from the representative from the CDSU, that is Central Licensing Authority. The next committee is Subject Expert Committee. This committee comprises of 25 panels of, and it is having around 350 medical experts across the country, and there are different types of classes of these committees based on the therapeutic areas. For example, the committees for the anti-diabetic drug, the oncology committee, or for the antimicrobial committee. So, depending upon the nature and the indication of the drug, there are different committees, and such type of 25 panels are there, and these panels they mainly look after the new drug, those which are approved outside and not approved into the India. Then we are having a technical committee. This is a separate committee of experts chaired by Director General Health Services DGHS to assist Apex Committee in supervision of a clinical trial. If the applicant is aggrieved by the decision of the subject expert committee, then he can approach to the technical committee, which is chaired by the DGHS and along with some experts. In that committee also, if he is not satisfied with the decision, then again there is a next level committee, that is we called Apex Committee, and it reviews the recommendation of the technical committee and the subject expert committee, and then it gives its own opinion. Let us see what is the timeline and the automatic approval of clinical trial. What is this automatic approval? So, the timeline mentioned in the new drug and clinical trial is 30 working days if the drug is discovered into the India. Under the provision to sub rule where no communication has been received from central licensing authority to the applicant within the said period, that is the 30 days for this drug which is discovered in India and 90 which is not discovered in India, the permission to conduct clinical trial shall be deemed to have been granted by central licensing authority, and such permission shall be deemed to be legally valid for all purposes, and the applicant shall be authorized to initiate clinical trial in accordance with these rules. If within this 30 days time period, if there is no communication from the licensing authority to the applicant, then that can be considered as a deemed approval, provided that he has to inform into the form CT4A to the licensing authority that he has not received any communication from the central licensing authority within 30 days and the drug is discovered into the India and the R&D has also been carried out into the India and the drug is proposed for the manufacture and marketing into the India. In such cases, if he has not received any communication, it is considered deemed approval. Then validity period of permission to initiate a clinical trial. So, earlier there was no validity period mentioned. Now, with this new drug and clinical trial rule, this provision has been made to include the validity period, and the validity period is 2 years from the date of its issue. Once the permission or approval has been obtained from the licensing authority, then the applicant has to initiate clinical trial within period of 2 years, and if it is not initiated, then that can also be extended, provided that the applicant has to give a reason why they have not conducted the clinical trial study, and after satisfying the central licensing authority can extend it. Now, we will switch toward the data requirement. So, while applying we have seen the various committees, we have seen various rules under which the applicant has to file the application. Now, we will see what is the data the applicant is supposed to submit while applying to the clinical trial. So, this is the data which are required, the chemical and pharmaceutical information about the drugs. So, in detail the applicant has to submit the chemical and pharmaceutical information like related to the chemistry of the drug, molecular formula, empirical formula, the structure of that drug, what is the name of the API. Then regarding pharmaceutical formulation, the dosage form, dose, strength which is proposed, all parameters related to the analytical validation, then the parameter related to the solubility, dissolution, integration, these parameters have to be submitted. Then detail about the animal pharmacology conducted, then animal toxicology conducted, then phase 1, 2 and 3 clinical trials. If the drug has been discovered into the India or outside the India, the studies which are conducted for the phase 1, 2 and 3, that data has to be submitted. Then the regulatory status of that drug in other countries. If the drug is already approved in other countries, then whether that drug is continued to be marketed in that country or whether it has been prohibited, withdrawn or the cancelled, or if any side effect or adverse effect associated with that drug because of which the drug has been banned in that country, that detailed information has to be submitted. Then COPP, that is a certificate of pharmaceutical product or free sale certificate, In case of the import, if the applicant would like to import the drug, then whether that drug is freely available in the market or not, whether that has been manufactured in compliance with the GMP or not, the certificate of pharmaceutical product issued by the concerned NRA, National Regulatory Authority or Licensing Authority, has to be submitted. Then apart from this, the labels and the prescribing information, including the dosage form, the precaution, warnings to be taken, whether it is Schedule H drug, H1 drug, X drug, what are the precaution to be taken, how the drug has to be taken, that prescribing information including label has to be submitted. Data for conduct of clinical trial or import or manufacture new drug. So, data for conduct of clinical trial, this is the data introduction I have to give has to be given, that is description and therapeutic class of the drug, then chemical pharmaceutical information for API and finished formulation, then data on the active pharmaceutical ingredient, that is physicochemical characteristic including empirical formula, molecular formula, that has to be given. Then data with respect to the description like a solubility, then partition coefficient, dissociation constant, then rotation, polymorphism, identification, enantiomerism, all these data related to the purity, impurity profile has to be submitted. Then complete specification including its identification, identity, then impurity profile, analytical method validations, the method of assay, the method of determination of the impurity including organic volatile impurity, then reference standard characterization, final release specification, then its material safety data sheet, how to handle the material, what precaution has to be taken. Then stability studies of the API as mentioned in the new drug and clinical trial rule for 30 degrees Celsius, for 45 degrees Celsius for the 6 months, that has to be submitted. Then the force degradation studies carried out to see the effect of the accelerated conditions on the drug, that is also required to be submitted. Data on formulation. The data on formulation means the data with respect to the dosage form, if it is a tablet, capsule, injections, what are the dosage form that has to be given, then what are the excipient used, the detailed composition, binder, then again diluent, the quantity added for the compression, that everything, the quantity and the excipient name has to be given. Then whether that is compatible with the excipient or not, that study has to be conducted and the result of the excipient compatibility study has to be submitted. Then validation of analytical method, the method which are used for the determination whether that method has been previously validated or not, that validation report has to be submitted. Then the master formula for the manufacturing of the dosage form, that master formula required to be submitted. Further in process quality control check, then finished product specification, we have seen that API specification has to be given. Here again the finished product specification has also required to be given. Then comparative evaluation with the international brand, if the drug is available outside the India, then what is the comparison with the approved brand, that is also required to be submitted. In India where applicable, pack presentation, then dissolution study, we know that dissolution, in vitro dissolution study to see the drug release, that is also required to submit. Then assay stability studies in intended pack, if it is a blister pack, then the stability studies required to be conducted in the same final packaging material, and that is required to be submitted. Then packing specification, impurities, content uniformity, pH wherever applicable. Then whatever the validation has been done for the process, that process validation also for the 3 batches, it has also required to be submitted. So, that was related to the API and the dosage form. If it is the application for the phase 1 trial, then the preclinical studies like animal pharmacology, animal toxicology, that is also required to be submitted. In the animal pharmacology, the applicant required to provide summary of the study which is conducted with the animals, then specific pharmacological actions, general pharmacological actions, then pharmacokinetic data like ADME data, absorption, distribution, metabolism and excretion in animals. Then the study conducted for the follow up and supplementary pharmacological studies, that is also required to be submitted. Then animal toxicology data including systematic toxicity study, male fertility study, female reproduction, developmental studies, then local toxicity study. If the product for the external use, then dermal toxicity study, allergenicity, then hypersensitivity studies. These studies are required to be submitted. Some these studies are required to be carried out in animal, and these studies may include guinea pig maximization, dose maximization studies, then local lymph node, what we call it is LLNA study, ocular toxicity study if the product is to be used for the treatment of the eyes, then inhalation toxicity study. All these studies required to be submitted depending upon the nature of the drug and the intention of the treatment of the drug. For certain drug genotoxicity study, carcinogenicity study, those drugs which are having the long exposure, for particularly for those drugs, these studies are required to be submitted. Where animal toxicity data has been submitted and the same is considered by the regulatory authority of the country which had earlier approved the drug, the animal toxicity study shall not be required to be conducted in India except in case where there are specific concerns recorded in writing. If the animal pharmacology, animal toxicity study has already been conducted in other countries, then that is not required to be repeated in the Indian animals or the preclinical studies, unless there is a particular or special concern. If the data is not satisfactory, something is wrong happen with the animals, if the deaths are more, if the toxicity is more, then it required to repeat the data. Then human or clinical pharmacological study after the preclinical study, that is a clinical pharmacological study. Phase 1 we have seen what is the phase 1 study. So, phase 1 has to submit the protocol first, and after the study then has to give the summary of that study, specific pharmacological effect, general pharmacological effect, then PK PD study. It is required for the those which are required to be conducted for the phase 1 study and for the early measurement of the drug. Then phase 2 study, same, it has to be provided the summary, the study report as given in the table 6 of the third schedule. So, third schedule of the new drug and clinical trial rule, it mentions about the particulars to be submitted for phase 2 study. Phase 3 data also required to be submitted after completion of phase 2. Here also the summary, then study report as given in table 6 of the third schedule, that is required to be submitted. If the drug is of a particular nature, then the special studies required to be conducted and the data required to be submitted. These special studies may be if the drug is particularly for the geriatric patient or for the children's, then the studies like BAB studies data and the studies conducted in the geriatric, pediatrics or the pregnant or nursing woman, that is also required to be carried out and required to be submitted to the licensing authority. Regulatory status in other countries, we have seen whether the drug is freely available in the market of other countries or whether it has been withdrawn or suspended, prohibited. If so, the reason of that is required to be submitted. Then prescribing information, propose full prescribing information, draft of label and cartoon. So, whatever the information the applicant or manufacturer is going to propose on the draft label or the information, that label prescribing information also required to be get approved from the licensing authority. Samples and sample and testing protocols, samples of pure drug substance and finished product, at least 50 clinical dose with a testing protocol, fully impurity profile and release specification. So, this full impurity profile release specification are required to be submitted along with the testing sample. The licensing authority, then they send this sample to the concerned laboratory, and once the result of satisfactory result from that laboratory comes, then the permission can be granted. Then new chemical entity and the global clinical trial, if any, assessment of risk versus benefit to the patient, innovation vis-a-vis existing therapeutic option, unmet medical need in the country. If it is there, the reason that has to be submitted. Then copy of drug license to manufacture any drug for sale granted by SLA in case the application is for manufacture or sale of new drug. So, this was about the new drugs that are the chemical entity. Again we have incorporated in our new drug definition, we have seen the phytopharmaceuticals. So, we will see what are the data requirement for the phytopharmaceuticals. Let us see first what is the phytopharmaceuticals. Phytopharmaceutical drug means a drug, it is of purified standardized fraction, assessed qualitatively and quantitatively with defined 4 bioactive or phytochemical compound of an extract of plant or its part. So, there is a requirement of it should contain the minimum 4 bioactive phytochemical compound. Further, we will add to this that this drug supposed to not be given in the parenteral dosage forms, then we call it as a phytopharmaceutical. Let us see what is the data requirement for the application of the manufacture of import of the phytopharmaceutical. So, it is given in the second schedule table 4, data to be submitted along with application to conduct clinical trial or import or manufacture of phytopharmaceutical drug in the country. So, this data requirement has been given in the 2 parts, that is part A and part B. We will see first the part A. Part A is related to the data to be submitted by the applicant, and it is related to the human clinical data like human or clinical pharmacology information. Then part B, data generated by the applicant. First is the data submitted by the applicant, and part B, data generated by the applicant. Data submitted by the applicant, it means that whatever the data available like published literature or data from other countries. Data generated means this may be from the R&D of the applicant. So, in this B part, identification, authentication, source of plant used for extraction and fractionation, that is required to be submitted. Then what are the processes used for the extraction and subsequent fractionation and purification. Formulation of phytopharmaceutical drug applied, and for the manufacturing processes of formulation, then again here it is required to submit the stability data, safety and pharmacological information, then human studies, confirmatory clinical trial, regulatory studies. We have seen in case of the chemical entities, that is in case of the drugs also, the regulatory status, whether it is prohibited, banned, approved. Then marketing information, post marketing surveillance and any other relevant information. So, we have seen the phase 3 is mandatory to conduct before marketing approval has been obtained, but there are certain cases wherein the clinical trial can be, phase 3 clinical trial can be waived off. For new drug substance discovered in India, these are some important things which we require to be known. For new drug substance discovered in India, clinical trial is required to be conducted right from phase 1. For new drug approved outside India, phase 3 studies need to be carried out to generate evidence of safety efficacy in Indian population, that we have seen. So, as per the rule 24, notwithstanding anything contained in these rules, what we have seen in our previous slides, the rules, where any person or institution or organization makes an application under rule 21 to conduct clinical trial of new drug which is already approved and marketed in country as specified under rule 101. So, the countries for the consideration that will be notified under the rule 101. The application shall be disposed of by way of grant of permission or rejection or process by way of communication to rectify any deficiencies as the case may be, as specified in Rule 22 by Central Licensing Authority within a period of 90 working days from the receipt of the application. So, if it is for the import, if it is an import case, within 90 days the application required to be disposed of either by rejection or either by query or either by the approval. So, the rule 101 mentioned that the Central Licensing Authority with the approval of the central government may specify by an order the name of the countries from time to time for considering the waiver of local clinical trial for approval of new drug under chapter 10 and for grant of permission for conduct of clinical trial under chapter 5. So, this rule mentions the notification of the countries. The central government, that is Central Licensing Authority with the approval of central government, will specify the name of the countries which are stringent regulatory authorities. If the drug is available in that countries and the applicant desires to import that drug, so that can be waived off the phases of the clinical trial, that is phase 3 can be waived off. So, you can see the slide wherein the diagram has been given for the regulatory pathway for approval of new drug or the IND. So, this is the actually the procedure what the applicant and the regulators has to be followed. You can see the slide. The application for import or the manufacture. So, there can be two type of application. The drug can make available into the India by the import or by the manufacturing, and also the drug can be a new drug or the drug can be a investigational new drug. For both of these the application has to submitted. We have seen the application forms and the fees. Irrespective of whether the application is for import or manufacture, if it is not approved, then application for CT has to be given. The CT protocol with respect to the design population, that undergoes the preliminary examination at the CDSCO, that is Central Licensing Authority, and after the preliminary examination with respect to the chemical pharmaceutical data and some administrative like forms, fees, this goes to the evaluation committee. We have seen the evaluation committee, IND committee. If it is the new molecule, then it goes to the IND committee. If it is a new drug, then it goes to the subject expert committee, and after evaluation by this committee, the committee gives the recommendation. Either they may ask the applicant to modify or amend the protocol. In that regard, they may issue the query to the applicant. Once the applicant receives the query, he has to respond to that query, and once that has been responded, that query whether they have amended the protocol as per the SEC committee's recommendation or not, that is again evaluated by the SEC committee, and in case of the IND by the IND committee. After that, again this SEC committee, after detailed deliberation, gives its opinion, and that opinion may be approval of the rejection. If the query raised by the SEC committee or the Central Licensing Authority, if it is not satisfied, then application can be rejected, or if it is to the satisfactory level, then approval can be given to conduct a clinical trials. Then once the clinical trial has been approved, the applicant required to conduct a clinical trial, and after conducting clinical trial, it required to submit the detailed report, that is the study report and the outcome of the clinical trial. That is again evaluated by the SEC committee or the IND committee, and if that results are satisfactory and if it is for the benefit of the patient, then that committee gives nod to the applicant, and after that if the applicant would like to import that drug, then he has to apply for the import. If it is the case of the manufacturer, then he has to apply through the manufacturing pathway. Then after seeing all this, if it is for the manufacturing, he has to submit all the details of the manufacturing premises. If it is a case of the import, then details of the manufacturing country of that country they have to submit, and after satisfactory submission of this, the permission can be granted for the manufacture of the import of the drug. So, this is the regulatory pathway. So, the applicant has to apply through the online portal. The approval process through online portal for grant of license for new drugs, we will see in brief how to apply and how it goes to the final conclusion. The applicant user has to register onto the portal that we call the Sugam portal. Then it will generate the user profile and manufacturer address repository. Then the applicant has to select application type and category, whether it is new drug, IND, veterinary, vaccine, that they have to select. Then the applicant has to upload the undertaking for providing correct information. The undertaking which will specify that whatever the information they are submitting, that is true, that undertaking has to be submitted or uploaded on the Sugam portal. Then the applicant required to upload the information regarding the manufacturer detail. If it is the manufacturing, the manufacturer detail; if it is the import, then importer's detail. After that, the applicant required to submit the details of the new drug, what we have seen in our earlier slides regarding pharmaceutical, chemical information. Regarding the new drug detail, they have to submit. Then there is a checklist. Checklist has been given on the Sugam portal for the different categories of the drug and different type of the drug. They have to select the category. If it is for the manufacture, then there is a different checklist. If it is for the import purposes, different checklist. If it is for the clinical trial, then what are the data requirement that has been mentioned in the checklist. The applicant required to fill up that checklist. Then upload payment challan. So, this payment can be whatever the fees we have seen in earlier slides, that fees has to be uploaded. This fees in case these fees in like a receipt they have to upload. If it is paid through the Bharat Kosh, then that Bharat Kosh receipt, or if it is paid into the Bank of Baroda, where to pay the fees, that has also been mentioned in our rule and the act. So, that fees paid challan or receipt has to be uploaded. Then submission of application by the applicant. Then after uploading all this, they have to submit it. Once the part from the application is over, then it is on the side of the regulatory side, that is application received by the nodal officer. So, it goes to the nodal officer. Application then forwarded to the reviewing officer. So, after the scrutiny, whether the application is complete in all manner, that will be looked after by the nodal officers, and if it is okay, they will forward it to the reviewing officer. Reviewing officer, after scrutinizing and reviewing the application, it forward to the nodal officers. Then nodal officer giving its recommendation, and after review forward it to the decision taking authority or the decision authority. If any deficiency in document, then at this level the query would be raised, and this query would go directly in the mail of the applicant. Then after satisfactory response from the applicant, it is again forwarded to the DDA or DA. Then this DDA, and that is a decision taking authority, it will forward the application to the central licensing authority for the approval purpose. And once the central licensing authority sees it that the application is complete in all manner, it may grant the license, and the permission is generated online. Then after generation of this permission, that is digitally signed by the central licensing authority, and that permission then is uploaded onto the website, that can be seen or downloaded by the applicant. So, this is the online procedure. So, this is about all about our lecture, and we will have the summary what we have seen in this lecture. So, we have seen various rules under the legal provision for regulation of clinical trial. Then we have seen the various rules related to the import, related to the manufacture, related to the test license. Then we have seen the various committees, like if the drug is for the investigational new drug, then IND committee. If it is a new drug, then subject expert committee. Then we have seen the technical committee, apex committee in case of the applicant if it is aggrieved by the decision of the previous committee. Then we have seen the data requirement, what are the document required for the new drug and what are the document required for the phytopharmaceuticals that we have seen. We have also seen that the phase 3 is the mandatory for before the marketing of the drug into the country, but we have also seen that there are some conditions wherein the phase 3 can be waived off. Then we have seen the requirement of local clinical trials, and further we have seen the procedure, regulatory pathways, and how to apply to the portal and how it moves from the reviewing officer to the central licensing authority on the SUGAM online portal. So, the last we will take a recap of this by checking your memory and attention. So, the first question for you, you have to state true or false. For new drug application, data from animal pharmacology is necessary. Yes, it is required. If it is a phase 1 and then the data phase 1, 2, 3, the data from the animal pharmacology is necessary. The next question is the fill in the blank. The IND committee is chaired by. So, the IND committee is chaired by DG, ICMR and Secretary, Department of Health and Research. Permission to conduct clinical trial of new drug already approved outside India is stated under which rule? So, this is a rule 24. Next question, minimum how many bioactive phytochemical compound are required to be assessed in a phytopharmaceutical drug? So, you have to recall the definition of phytopharmaceutical, and the answer is minimum 4 bioactive phytochemical compounds. So, this is about the lecture 6. We will see the next provisions and what is there in again in the new drug and clinical trial rules in our next lecture. Till then, you take care, all the best, and thank you for watching this video.